Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this black-green +1/+1 counter deck, which uses a lot of new cards. One of those is Super Shredder, which is a 1/1 with Menace, saying whenever another permanent leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So there's a lot of ways this can grow, with creatures leaving the battlefield, even tokens getting sacrificed or fetch lands. So those are all great to enable Super Shredder, and things go especially crazy if we also combine it with Michelangelo, which will give us an additional +1 counter each time, and is also joined by a mutagen token, which we can sacrifice. And if we put the mutagen token on Super Shredder, it essentially picks up 4 +1 counters, 2 from the mutagen itself, and then 2 more from a permanent being sacrificed. And then we could maybe even top that off with Mutagen Man, which can make X mutagen tokens, and we can now sacrifice those mutagens for free since they get a 1 mana cost reduction. So these 3 cards are really what this deck is all about, and then it's just about enabling them and finding some other sacrifice synergies to grow Super Shredder. We do have some mana acceleration with Llanowar Elves and Badger Mole Cub, so we can sink more mana into a large Mutagen Man. We also have a little bit of graveyard hate with a new The Ooze, a legendary artifact, which can also give us more mutagen tokens if our creatures with +1 counters die, and it can also activate to exile a card from a graveyard and give us a mutagen, so this has a lot of synergy throughout. And then we also have one actual Scavenging Ooze, which can pay a green to exile a card from a graveyard. If it's a creature, we gain a life and put a +1 counter on it, so this can be a little bit better if we need to get rid of multiple cards at once, whereas the Ooze can only exile 1 at a time. So those are the main differences. And then Obsessive Pursuit also has excellent synergy throughout, as it will make a clue token when it enters, and then once each turn at the cost of 1 life. And then whenever we attack, we get X +1/+1 counters on target attacking creature, where X is the number of permanents we've sacrificed this turn. If X is 3 or greater, that creature also gains a lifelink until end of turn, which can also be very helpful in a racing situation. So the clue tokens from Pursuit only cost a 1 mana to sacrifice if we control a Mutagen Man, so that's another neat synergy. And of course they also help grow Super Shredder, and then the extra +1 counters also pair very well with Michelangelo. So there's a lot going on here, but this is also mainly just a great way to generate additional cards against more controlling strategies, which might have an easier time dealing with our creatures. And then rounding out the deck, we also have a few removal spells with Requiting Hex, which can occasionally blight to gain 2 life. And then Maelstrom Pulse as the most versatile answer that can occasionally deal with multiple permanents that have the same name. Do have to be careful that we don't target something that we also control. Let's say the opponent has 2 Badger Moles and we control 1. We will still lose our copy as well, but usually we want to deal with slightly more expensive permanents. And then we also have the full set of I Still Explorer, alongside 6 fetch lands for Fabled Passage to Escape Tunnel. Hopefully we'll draw 1 alongside the I Still, which can then replay lands out of the graveyard, in addition to milling a card whenever a land enters. So this can maybe fill the graveyard to enable Scavenging Ooze and the Ooze artifact. And by sacrificing a fetch land, we also enable Super Shredder, as well as enabling the Obsessive Pursuit, since it also tracks fetch lands that are sacrificed, so we can maybe get those additional +1 counters. And then of course the extra mana we get from sacking a fetch land over and over can also be sunk into Mutagen Man and other various abilities, like perhaps Ba Sing Se, which lets us Earthbend 2, so that also plays well with Michelangelo and with a Badger Mole Cub, and can maybe build up a big creature if there's a bit of a board stall happening, and another excellent tool against control. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Got double Badger Mole to generate some mana to sink into Mutagen Man. Obsessive Pursuit, another decent mana sink. And we get to start with Escape Tunnels, so if we draw I Still Explore, we're also happy. And can get a forest for now. Swamp into Flail, opponent on the discard deck. And a Hardcast Bloodghast, I don't see that every day. So they might have more copies in hands that they want to get rid of. Alright, it's going to be a little painful here with all 4 copies of Overgrown Tomb. But yeah, I guess for now we can just play the Cub, play the Pursuit, And then with the leftover mana I could still sack a clue. And then next turn we'll be able to sink a bunch of mana to Mutagen Man, which also sets up the Pursuit, so we can gain life back. And now the Iron Shield Elf. So that's another discard outlet alongside the Flail. Now they just need a payoff. Flamewake is gonna return right away. So yeah, that's a healthy amount of damage. But with Pursuit next turn we should be fine. Okay. So how much mana are we working with? 8 total. I would like to deploy at least 1 Llanowar Elves. And then I'm fine taking 2. Just Mutagen Man for... can do it for 4, and then still sack the clue to draw a card. See what we get. Another Pursuit will be excellent for next turn. And then I just want to gain a good chunk of life here. But I could also put some +1 counters on my creature on defense. So now we've already sacrificed 3 things. And I'll essentially get 3 more counters, gain 7 up to 13 with 3 blockers. I think that'll be enough. So I can save some mutagens for next turn, knowing about another Pursuit. Opponent gets to block, maybe discard. And discards a land. Okay, that's fine. And then I think I just pass. Could maybe sack 1 more token, but then I probably should have done so before attacking. I think we'll be okay. Even if they play Monument or Cool But Rude and level it up, we should still be safe enough. And Mutagen Man has a fine block on the Iron Shield Elf. Tersa, gonna discard 2. A land Elf. And they're sending it. So we'll block Tersa, 7, 8, 9, that's fine. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up, yeah, next turn especially with a second Pursuit. We'll easily present lethal in addition to just gaining a ton of life. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Missing a fetch land to go with I Still Explore, but we do have Michelangelo with Mutagen Man. Plenty of green mana, and then hopefully find black at some point. I'll try it. So next turn I could go Michelangelo, maybe even sack the Mutagen, although once we play Mutagen Man we can sack them for free. Alright, Fabled Passage is a nice pickup. I guess now that they played a voice, it is good to have a 3-3 on defense. So going Michelangelo, sack the Mutagen, still worth it. Another Voice of Victory is fine. Okay, so I can play the I Still, play Fabled Passage, get a Swamp. And then maybe wait on Mutagen Man until we can sink more mana into it. And then I could fetch now, although I could also wait, since we've already played our extra land. And keep Michelangelo on defense. Because if I sack the Fabled Passage next turn, we could also maybe get additional counters on the Obsessive Pursuit. Opponent is a tokens deck. And they want to draw a card, giving up a Voice of Victory in the process. That works for me. Pursuit also gives us a bit of insurance in the event of a board wipe, which they could very well have. Alright, so start by fetching. And then I can play the pursuit, replay the fetch. Debating whether or not I want to play Mutagen Man this turn. I don't have to, if we're afraid of a Day of Judgment, for instance. So we've already sacrificed 3 things for Obsessive Pursuit, which means we'll get 4 counters thanks to Michelangelo at least. But I could make it more. If I play Mutagen Man for X equals 3, I can sacrifice 3 more Mutagen. Yeah, let's just go for it. Or I can just wait to present lethal next turn if they don't wipe my board. It could also be worth it, although they might present a couple blockers, and then at least Mutagen Man has Trample. And then, do I put all my eggs in the Michelangelo basket just to gain more life? I think we want to spread things out a little bit. So an attack for 18. Opponent takes it. Okay, so they have plans for the Voice of Victory. Maybe they're just missing land 4 to cast Day of Judgment. It enters tapped, exiles our graveyard, so it does get rid of our fetch land. So unless this is a Star Cage, they seem pretty dead, and even with Star Cage, Explorer would live. Maybe a split up, but even then we get to keep Mutagen Man. Alright, rest in peace. Fine to shut down the Explorer, sort of. But yeah, it's not going to be good enough. Make an extra token. And now we can sack our clues for 1 mana, thanks to Mutagen Man, draw a few more cards. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with what could be a fine hand. We're missing some of our heavy hitters, but we have some mana acceleration, some removal, and some graveyard hate. And then hopefully our threats will follow. Opponent black-white. And a scavenger, so maybe the skeletons deck. Okay, then I'm happy to take out the scavenger, first chance I get. I guess I don't have to necessarily cast a hex now, can wait. And just pass a turn. Sheltered by Ghosts is now going to get punished. Don't mind blinding to gain life here. 1/1 Cub is fine. Okay, Mutagen Man pretty good with Michelangelo as well. So we have 5 mana. This might be a Michelangelo plus the Ooze turn. And then I can sack a Mutagen to grow the Cub. And then the Ooze can start exiling their stuff. Want to leave the creatures in case we draw Scavenging Ooze and get rid of the Sheltered by Ghosts first. Forsaken Miner, another card that we wouldn't mind exiling. And another Sheltered by Ghosts, fair enough. So that was their only removal, so they didn't have a choice. Deals with a cub. I can still Maelstrom Pulse Sheltered by Ghosts itself, if I really have to. Because now we're down to 3 mana, so I wouldn't be able to pay the ward on the miner. Is that the plan? Versus... yeah, Mutagen Man for 1 isn't all that exciting. Although I would still be able to sack all these mutagens for free. Yeah, if I pulse, get back Cub, it's not like I'll be able to do anything afterwards. So, could also be an Obsessive Pursuit turn. Sack 1 mutagen. And attack. And then the Pursuit will also trigger. So I'll be attacking with a 5/5. And then now Pursuit plus Mutagen Man is a little bit more appealing. And Michelangelo has a 5/5, no longer dies to a Nowhere to Run, which they're also playing. Second Miner. Oof, and a third. Well, talk about getting rewarded for casting a Maelstrom Pulse. This is going to be a blowout. Can maybe exile my own stuff for a mutagen. Shredder's not bad, but yeah, this is going to deal with all 3. Get back Badger Mole. And attack. And our opponent's going to scoop it up. Still had some pretty nice leftovers as well. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Does need a bit of help off the top, but we have Pursuit to draw more cards. The Ooze for Graveyard Hate. And get in for 1. Passage also a way to get an extra counter from Obsessive Pursuit. Deceit will have a look, taking away the Ooze. Which yeah, could have been pretty good here for opponents planning to Kavero back the Deceit. And now I'm a little bit short of sacrificing 3 things to Obsessive Pursuit. So let's start by sacking a Clue and see where we're at. And then I might sack a second one. Eye Still's good to have. So I can wait on Fabled Passage. And Winter Night Stories will draw and discard. Discarding the Excruciators, so that's their combo. Well, is it too much to ask to draw my Scavenging Ooze now? I guess we'll go exploring and hope they don't Kavero Excruciator. They do have a Restless Reef to mill me for 4 already. So yeah, that's gonna be problematic to say the least. But I think it's still my play. Requiting Hex would be an answer to Restless Reef. And then I could still sack a Clue. Can do that in their turn. Opponent's gonna take out Eye Still, no need to mill in response. So not going for Kavero yet, at least. I think I will sack the Clue now just to be mana efficient, since we can always activate Basing Say. Reason to wait is to get more counters from Obsessive Pursuit. Alright, we did find Hex, so that could answer a Reef if they try and activate it later. And now Mutagen Man. They could have an Essence Scatter, but I'm kind of down to sink a bunch of mana into this. X equals 4. And then we can grow the Elves. Sacking at least 3 here, so we also get the Pursuit's lifelink. And attack. Possible they have a cover-up next turn to wipe the board. Opponent waited for their Requiting Hex. So no life gain. And cover-up will indeed wipe the board. Curious to see what they extract. Could be Mutagen Man, makes sense. So that's no longer a possible top deck. So activate Basing Se. Wouldn't be able to get lifelink, but can start applying some meaningful pressure, and another Pursuit isn't bad. I guess I have to be careful here with another cover-up, exiling all the forests out of my deck. Would also get the ones in hand. So it could be a reason to target the swamp instead. But if they extract the forests, then we'll draw more action, which is fine by me. Yep. So what are we extracting? Going for the eye still. Well, at least they're giving us time to get value out of Obsessive Pursuit, so that's nice. And Scavenging Ooze can now exile their Doomsday Excruciator before they get it back. So that was a good draw. If I have Basing Se, I could sack 1 Clue and a Mutagen, so wouldn't be able to gain life this turn. So I think we just go for the Ooze. Exile your Excruciator. Exile your Winter Night Stories. And then I could still Basing Se here, I suppose. We dealt with the more important things. Opponent's gonna stock up. Alright, so now with 2 creatures in play, there's a good chance we can finally attack and gain a bunch of life back, while drawing in the process. Opponent could also, of course, hardcast the Excruciator at this point. Another stock up, so yeah, coast is clear. I'm pretty sure we can attack for lethal now. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Can sack 4 clues. And Badger Mole doesn't hurt either. But yeah, if I just sack 4 clues, that would be 8 +1 counters, which is a lethal. But I could play a Badger Mole as well. And we could also sack a Mutagen. Another Badger Mole, is that worth playing? I don't think it matters. Attack. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a double cub opener. Good mana sink if we are up against a graveyard deck here with a Scavenging Ooze. I'll try it. Opponent on the Aura deck, so we will need some actual removal. A Mutagen Man would also be a fine curve topper here with Michelangelo and Super Shredder. And Aerialist is next. So, could hold Badger Mole till next turn, so I can double Badger Mole right away. If Badger Mole survives, we get to pretty much empty our hand. So there is some upside. Yeah, we'll just play it now. Seam Rip, also a clean answer. And Ethereal Armor for the beatdown. Alright, Maelstrom Pulse could be a way to maybe answer some of their things. Maybe wait for them to play another Seam Rip and get both, or Ethereal Armor. Because yeah, right now it's not the most efficient answer. So instead, can play Cub and then still play Michelangelo. And if the Cub survives, I might have enough mana to pay the ward on Aerialist. Well, now it's gonna be pretty hard. Do I trade for a Veteran? If I take 8, what's my plan for next turn? Definitely won't be able to pay ward 4. So might just have to Maelstrom Pulse one of their auras. I don't think I can keep Michelangelo around. Or can I? If I pulse the Ethereal Armor, this would still hit for 3. Although getting back our Cub is pretty tempting. I think we trade and then just try to get back the Cub. Which in turn gets to Earthbend again. And then I can still play the Ooze. But we are dead to a lot of different auras here. But now I have the mana to maybe pay the ward. Our opponent had another Seam Rip as it turns out. Goes for Cub again. Alright, we're not dead yet. And we drew a Requiting Hex. So if our opponent had the Shard Mage's Rescue, we would have just been dead. So they shouldn't have one in hand. So then I can afford 2 Hex. And then sink a bunch of mana into the Ooze, and I don't mind blinding either to gain more life. Okay, and then just activate Ooze. Keep the Mutagen for Shredder. But yeah, we've got a long way to go. Another Aerialist. And now Ice still does not have a fetch land to go with it. So Shredder might be preferable. And then probably don't need to put more eggs onto the Ooze basket. So let's see. Could also try and grow Shredder. I'm kind of assuming the Aerialist is going to fly next turn, so we wouldn't be able to block it anyway. So we'll attack like so. And then we can exile one more creature. So fetch land would go pretty hard next turn. I'll take a Mutagen Man or Michelangelo, perhaps. It's going to be a vendor. Opponent's still missing a third land to make a roll token. And we drew a fetch land. So now we can grow Shredder a bunch. Also fill the graveyard to maybe grow Scavenging Ooze. And then we did mill a creature. Fine with any and all trades. But we'll just grow the ooze once again. There's still definitely combinations that can kill us. A couple more ethereal armors, giving Aerialist flying. And next turn we could also look into the second ability on Escape Tunnel to make our creatures unblockable. Right, they did have another Seam Rip. Deciding between Ooze and Shredder. Goes for Ooze, which grows Shredder. A Maelstrom Pulse here would be pretty juicy as well with triple Seam Rip. And Vendor can fly the Aerialist now. But I believe that they're dead here if they attack with Escape Tunnel, giving Forest and Explorer unblockable. Embassing Say also potentially useful. But it's not every day that we can use the second ability here. But yeah, there's a few different ways we could have done it. Just growing Shredder twice is already good enough. Well, that was an incredibly close game. Definitely got lucky their opponent never found a third land, or else they would have been able to empty their hand more efficiently. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a functional hand. We have our Cub to ramp out Explorer and a fetch land. And then Super Shredder can hopefully benefit from all the extra sacrifice effects, basically. Facing what could be blue-red lessons. So then I don't expect my creatures to necessarily survive. Do I Cub or maybe Michelangelo now? I think I still Cub. Gonna wait to play Shredder until I can maybe grow it in the same turn. Opponent had the Spell Snare. So it could also be a Spelementals deck. Nope, still looks like Lessons. Now let's go Michelangelo. Don't even know if I want to sack the Mutagen, since they most likely have an answer. Opponent's gonna Quench. So no Michelangelo. Explorer should resolve. And then Fabled Passage goes pretty well with it. Although we will run out of basics pretty soon here with triple Explorer. Ooze a way to maybe exile their Lessons. There's only one in the graveyard so far. So this is more of a setup turn. Next turn we'll actually reap the rewards of all the extra lands we have. So there's no real reason to sack it now. Can maybe save it to grow Shredder some more next turn. Opponent just gonna cantrip with the Wisdom. So yeah, happy to clean up their graveyard. Ideally play both Shredder and the Ooze. Opponent's gonna abandon attachments, so that will enable Grand, so maybe the next Wisdom will draw 3. And we could also see them take out the Explorer. Opponent just taps out for a Monument. That's fine. So we have free reign to grow Super Shredder. And grow we will. Would have been even more fun with the Michelangelo in play. And wow, opponent's just gonna scoop it up here. I mean, to be fair, we would have had a pretty large Shredder, and then I probably would have sunk my mana into Scavenging Ooze, exiling their Lessons. And then the turn after, assuming Shredder's still around, we can probably mount a pretty good offense. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This seems like an okay starting point. Might need some more interaction. Don't have any 1-drops. Mutagen Man also pairs well with what we have. Facing blue-black. Not sure yet which variety. Could be a graveyard deck. Never mind, ninjas with Dark Leo. So they will get to trigger that. They don't really have a reason to pick it back up, although Super Shredder at least grows off sneaking opposing creatures as well. I think for now, Badger Mole seems fine. And then next turn we can double spell. Plus if I draw another Badger Mole, it's even better. No blocks. Would be surprised to see Kaito, but it is possible. Alright, opponent goes for it. They could decide to lock down the forest with the -2 ability, which would be a pretty good way to slow us down. But now they also lose Kaito, so I'm not sure if that was necessarily worth it. And then I think Super Shredder can immediately start growing. And mana is definitely not a bottleneck with this hand. Fabled Passage, another way of growing Super Shredder. Probably want to play Michelangelo first. And then Mutagen Man to go over the top. Opponent replays Dark Leo. 2 mana left. Which they're gonna keep available. Now Hex is great too. So I'll play Michelangelo. I may not actually have a Swamp left to fetch since I have it in hand. So then we'll wait on Fabled Passage and keep Hex available. I guess I should just take out Leo now. I guess there's no real reason to wait. And I will blight onto the Badger Mole to gain a bit of extra life. Should have done this before attacking in case they are playing a counterspell somehow. Although I wouldn't expect them to. Possible they have their own Hex. Alright, Detect Intrusion, actually countering it here. Okay, didn't play around it, so get punished for it. But I think we'll still be okay. So we'll take 1, opponent gets a ninja. And they're gonna get to draw a card as well. But how much damage can we present? A lot is the answer. This grows Shredder. And then Mutagen for 3. Could have been 4 with a Badger Mole. So with 4 mutagens, they essentially give Shredder 4 counters each. 2 from sacking it and being enhanced by Michelangelo, and then 2 more from sacking a permanent, and once again getting enhanced by Michelangelo. So they're already forced to trump Shredder. So then I can grow Michelangelo a bunch. So we'll see if they can answer Shredder. If they don't, they're very dead. Dark Leo attacks, makes a blocker, so may as well. Gonna keep Mutagen Man around. And just playing Michelangelo also grows Shredder even more, since we can lose it to the legendary rule, make a mutagen, maybe put the mutagen somewhere else. Alright, they did have a get lost, although map tokens are also pretty nice with Mutagen Man. And a Maelstrom Pulse. Opponent does have 3 mana up, but can maybe start by sacking some maps. The ooze doesn't seem necessary. Don't need another Michelangelo. I'll even play another one. And then sack the mutagen on the forests. And then I can still pulse second main, or I can just pulse the ninja. But if they have removal, I would only have 9 damage here. So I would rather attack first, see what they have, and then maybe pulse Dark Leo. So I played it maybe a little too cautiously, since I could have just gone for lethal here by growing the Trampler, for instance. But if they have nothing, they're still probably dead. Another Kaito can lock something down.
Out of the shadows and into the fray.
And then we still have 2 lethal attackers. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Just need an extra land or 2, especially a fetch lane to go with Explorer would be nice. But we have Shredder, Michelangelo and Mutagen Man, which are all incredibly synergistic. Don't think I need to shock myself, I'll find a gap in my curve to play the Hex if I need to. Elusive Otter, so a prowess deck. And we found a fetch land. So yeah, could already play Shredder, or can maybe wait to immediately grow it. Next turn Shredder into fetch lane makes this a 3-3. And then Hex is mostly trying to take out a Slick Shot, which we can't easily block. Opponent opts. And we take 2. And no second lane, so that works for me. This turn, Shredder, and then just sack a mutagen for 1. Make both 3/3s so they don't die to Burst Lightning anymore. And then next turn with Passage and Explorer we can kind of go off. They might have some bounce spells. Boomerang basics indeed. Does that change anything? I think we still like Explorer. Although maybe getting Shredder in play is still slightly better. And then next turn we can grow it again. Get a swamp so we can Hex. And now a Sleight of Hand probably finds a land. But yep, opponent kept a 1-lander with a cantrip, hoping to get there. And so far it hasn't materialized. But there is a Steam Vents. If they don't remove my Shredder and Michelangelo, we could potentially present lethal next turn with a large Mutagen Man. Another bounce spell. In that case, I think I will just Hex. And And this turn I think I prefer Explorer. Maybe only fetch once to keep more basics in the deck. And play the Wastewood Verge. And replay Shredder. Although now maybe it was a mistake playing it as a 1-1, since they could now Burst Lightning it more easily. But either way, we should still have lethal with Mutagen Man and Michelangelo. Yeah, there's a Burst Lightning. Fair enough. Alright, so we'll just do this a few times. Yeah, Shredder would have been huge. Opponent did successfully deal with it, but it required a lot of interaction. So we can cast Mutagen Man for X equals 6. And then every mutagen is 2+1 counters. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. We've got our 3 creatures that all pair very well with each other, plus some removal. Good mana. So now it's just a matter of getting them all in play and hopefully not losing too many along the way. Facing a red deck. I guess, yeah, we cannot hex since this only makes green initially. But now we can maybe play Super Shredder. And then next turn Michelangelo into hex can immediately give it 2+1 counters. Because, yeah, we don't have 2 black sources at the moment. They may not see Super Shredder as a huge threat, we'll see. But a burn deck is certainly going to have some cheap answers to our smaller creatures. Now Hexing Squelcher. Okay, so Michelangelo could also sack the mutagen on itself, and then we'll have a pair of 3/3s. Don't need to target their stuff necessarily. Even the Mutagen Man lets us sack this for free later. I think having a pair of 3/3s is reasonable. And then I don't think I should try and stay back to block, since they're probably happy to finish off my creature. I can try and turn this into a bit of a race. Another Hard Claw. And a Viper. Okay. Opponent stays back. So now Mutagen Man for 2 is perfect. Doesn't trigger the Viper. And I can probably diversify my +1 counters. This will go up to 7, so they cannot quadruple block and trade. Opponent takes it. Challenger's fine. All out attack. So how do we possibly lose from here? I'm not quite sure. If they have 2, let's say, Burst Lightnings to deal 2 damage, this goes up to 4. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, this is fine. A Needlehead is not going to cut it here. Could also hex it now. But our opponent's just dead on board. So yeah, faster than Monoreds, but we did get lucky that they didn't have a ton of removal, which could have maybe affected things. So we got to see this black-green +1 counter deck in action, and yeah, I was quite impressed between all the synergies we had with Super Shredder, Michelangelo, and then of course Mutagen Man, kind of being the all-star of the deck. So those seem to be the cornerstone of the archetype, and then there's a bunch of ways we can fill out the deck from there, but adding some mana acceleration makes sense if we want to sink more mana into a large Mutagen Man, and then we still want a little bit of removal as well to keep up with other fast decks, so that's kind of where I ended up. But of course, as a mid-range deck, sometimes you'll have the problem of drawing the wrong half of your deck in certain matchups, like drawing too many removal spells against a creatureless control deck, or not finding your graveyard hate against graveyard combo, since we only have the 2 pieces, so that can certainly come up, and that's where playing this deck in best of 3 might give you a slightly bigger advantage, since we do have some pretty good sideboard options like Duress against combo and control decks, and we can always add more removal when needed, so we can kind of tweak the deck according to what our opponent is playing as well, while keeping that core of +1 counter synergies. But yeah, for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.